Shaco Support, one of the first off-meta videos I ever made about an Inting Shaco getting to Grandmaster. This was actually basically 2 years ago at this point, about a Korean Shaco player named Finir. And at the time, Shaco Support was very unpopular. He was pretty popular in the jungle, wasn't very good, and so people took him to support. So today we're starting a new series, looking back at all of these off-meta picks and how good they are in Season 13. We're going to have a look at high elo player who's master, pretty high LP master, or pretty much Grandmaster. This guy plays a crazy amount of Shaco Support, is pretty good at it, and is a very good example of how Shaco can be played in the new season. So here we are in-game with Shaco Support, and you can see a lot of similarities already. We can still see the Arcane Comet. We still see the W start. I played a lot of Shaco Support myself, so I have quite a lot of insight into how it should be played in solo queue, so it'll be interesting to see this high elo guy, and see how he's managed to do it, and have success. The old playstyle of Shaco was very much AFK in lane, try not to lose the game for your AD carry, and then as the game went on, you were able to become an int player a bit more, baiting the enemies into bad situations, and really causing them to lose more than you lose. You can buy Zhonyas, you can stall out time, you can put loads of boxes on top of each other, and make them run into you. And so it was very important to be prepared, get to objectives early, and really just mind game the enemies. We can see in this game, the old Shaco would start stacking boxes in lane to make his lane stronger. However, this Shaco, he put one in this bush level 1 to protect against invade. I believe that was something the old one did, because you still get the spell thieves from it. But alternatively, he is doing a super leash on his jungler. He goes for the backstab, there it is. One buff, one on red buff. He's prepped one on Krugs as well. The question is, does Kindred even want to do Krugs next? I mean, you might as well if you're getting a crazy leash like this. Both of them get popped. The small one, it doesn't get stolen. It does pop on it though. Important to not place it too far away and start stealing stuff. Okay, getting into lane. Shaco with W level 1 is just off cooldown. You can see he still is basically full mana, hasn't really had to spend anything. But here is where you see probably the biggest weakness of Shaco Support. Early on, he can't really do anything unless the enemies play into him. This gets much harder in high elo. If you're in Platinum, I played it in Platinum, and below, there's almost nothing the enemies really do that will force you to do anything bad. It's very easy to like scale up through lane with basically any support and then use that to win the game. But once you start getting into Diamond, and especially in these Master games, you're going to be pushed really hard by the enemies. If you ever do anything bad, or even if you don't do anything bad, but you just don't have an answer, then they can punish you for it. And so you can see right here, Shaco has no boxes up. He takes his E level 2. Good poke. He's trying to chunk out the enemy AD carry. Sometimes you want to set up boxes aggressively in these bushes. Currently he's going for a mega defensive box to protect Ezreal from the Galio E. And so if Galio goes in, Ezreal can stand on top of this and he won't be able to die. This is very defensive leaning, and it's kind of what you need to do on Shaco Support. In some matchups, you are able to be the aggressor, but it's much more common you need to be standing back. Ezreal unfortunately isn't near the box, but he does get away from it, and then in insane placement to trap the Galio in. Let's just check that again. So Galio goes in, gets a good catch onto Ezreal. He gets his E off though out of the taunt radius. This box right here splits them up. Galio can't get away from this damage because it hits everything around it. Really good counterplay by our Shaco. Really, enemies shouldn't be dying to you in lane. This isn't something that should happen every game. It's a little bit lucky. Shaco does have double summoner combat summoner spells. So if someone goes in, they can get exhausted to get denied a kill. And if they over-aggress like Galio did, they get ignited and shut down. It's a very positioning-based laning phase. You can use your Q and bait people in, but you just don't really want to take damage. He's used all of his potions, simply surviving this lane. Shaco has not been jumped on at all, he hasn't been auto-attacking anyone. All he has done is put down boxes, and he's already out of sustain, almost out of mana. And so you can see sort of how much of a knife's edge this champion is early on in lane. It's really rewarding if you get through it, but it's a bit painful early on. And I think in solo queue, one of the problems that I've seen with it is that if your AD carry doesn't play around it well, and doesn't give up early lane, or you misplace one box in a certain position that you think is good, and it turns out not to be good because the enemy plays around it, then your early game is not really strong enough. And if one of you dies in lane, or both of you die in lane, or even if you just get pushed out of lane, that can be enough to punish you into like a game losing kind of situation. And so early game is probably the hardest part, like by far, of Shaco support. Box placement is the biggest thing. Placing boxes in bushes and standing around them is good if enemies are focused on you. If they're focused on your AD carry, which they really should be, then placing boxes around here so that your AD carry has a place to run to is the best option. Shaco is not a roaming support. He can barely do anything in this kind of a play. He's kind of just contesting Galio just to make sure if there is a fight he's around, but really the best thing you can do is queue into someone and then put a box behind them to trap them in a bad spot. You can see there is a fight happening. I think it'll probably just be disengaged. Any kind of nothingness that happens is good for Shaco though. Ari's just baiting this. Maybe she can turn the kill. Good box to deny this Victor from entering the fight. Still not a fight they really want. But yeah, any nothingness that happens is good for you because you scale very well, whereas most supports are based on playmaking, especially like a Galio. This guy wants to be running around trying to kill Ari, trying to kill the Kindred as well. Shaco is happy to just bide his time and wait. So Ezreal just farming bot lane against the Kai'Sa, doing pretty well. It's a pretty even matchup until Kai'Sa gets 6, where he can try and look for a solo kill, but it's mostly just the supports roaming together. Galio can't get anything done, Shaco's happy about it. First item, Fiendish Codex. I've honestly never seen anyone buy this first. It's very good flat AP and ability haste. The items also have changed for Shaco support, because in the past it would be you should only buy... Well, we actually saw a Arcane Combat fly across the map. What was the old build? The old build in this video, you could see Ardent... What's this called? Imperial Mandate into stalling items. It was really good back then because of how cheap it was. But sort of ever since then, Riot slowly nerfed that item. It was really, really good on basically every AP support and made AP supports much better. But now Shaco has changed as a support. He's no longer sort of early / mid game based. He is a scaling AP support, and so Leandries is currently his go-to option, which is a bit more expensive, but you do get the early power spike with the 1300 gold lost chapter, whereas before you were just trying to get your full item as fast as you could. And once you get lost chapter, you're pretty strong. I guess this Shaco believes that the AP from Fiendish Codex and the cooldown reduction is worth it though. We haven't seen him place many boxes, by the way, recently. When I play the old Shaco that I've learnt from, and when I play it in solo queue, I'd be placing probably like 3 boxes in this lane to prep it, whereas this guy hasn't. He does have Ezreal, and so Ezreal should always be pretty safe in these situations anyway. But it's interesting to see, since he's gone for this early AP, he's preserving a lot more mana. You really gotta have a lot of box knowledge to be able to do this. Because otherwise, it's always better to just spam boxes, obviously, because you don't have to put them in the right place. If you save your boxes and preserve mana and go for damage instead, then your boxes have to be a lot more high value. They're just chilling in this lane, no one should really die. I love this setup of boxes though on either side of the wave. Unfortunately the enemies did start Sweeper, which is the counter to Shaco support, best thing you can do against him. It doesn't completely destroy him, it's just the best option. But if you put boxes on the side of the wave, then the minions won't hit, and so you can just force enemies to have to either walk through the boxes to try and get to you, or just AFK their lane and just farm up. Most of the time they'll just have to farm up or they will die. Pretty good dive, mostly done by Kindred. Places a box down just in case the enemy jungler comes. One of the reasons that Shaco support is so great is that if you do get ganked, you can always put boxes down, stand on top of them, and force enemies to try and fight into you. It's the same reason I love Heimerdinger support so much. Some supports, like a Nautilus or something, they just try and escape. They just try and get out of the gank. All they can really do is hook someone. But there could be 3 or 4 boxes in this lane the enemy jungler doesn't know about, and so even trying to kill Shaco and an Ezreal in this lane would be very difficult. One of the reasons why Zac hasn't been bot lane yet. Just looking for a bit of vision before he bases. Absolutely nothing he can do with this mana. Q and W cost 110, he doesn't even have enough to jump into mid lane, but one thing you can do, speaking of mid lane ganks, if you know this area is not warded, he started ward item, but you can buy Sweeper pretty fast. if you know that this area isn't warded, or you sweep it, then you can queue over this wall, put a W box behind the enemy, and use that to push them forwards into your mid laner. By the time you get there, it's pretty much a flash that the enemy has to use. The box should activate in time if you place it correctly. But Shaco, we see Lost Chapter bought. If you get an early kill, you get so accelerated on this champion. It's nothing like, I guess, like playing a Janna or like a Nautilus or a Thresh, where your early kills would only matter on your carry. If Shaco gets these early kills, he becomes so much better. It's probably like a 10 times difference compared to being behind. If you're behind on Shaco support, the game can fall apart pretty easily. He is just sticking bot lane, using his E to proc support item. Honestly, a very fast support item proc, considering it's Shaco. A lot of the W boxes proccing means he gets it a lot faster, like on the Galio earlier. But otherwise, you're kind of forced to E-spam as much as you can to get it off if they're not walking into boxes at any time. But no, this is very fast, especially getting the Lost Chapter as well. He's probably only a couple minutes away from getting an item, realistically, once they get this tower. Galio's still roaming, it's not terrible. They tried to make it play mid, it didn't work. They could try and gank this lane, but Shaco is now level 6, and so his ultimate is up. Very hard to even pin him down. Shaco ultimate. The old guy, the way he would use it, is to bait people in, pretending it's him once they jump onto it, or they guess the other one's him. He then uses his Q, or Zhonya's / stopwatch to bait them in and just stall time till his Q is back up, jumping out of the fight on low health. One of the tricks we learned from our Shaco mid video, which I'm sure we'll do another review on at some point, is the way clone leashing works, where if your clone goes a certain distance away from you, and you're still invisible, it will appear next to you, but the enemies won't know that it's the clone. It'll look exactly like it's you. He does get shut down, but trades kill with the enemy mid, pretty worth. In this situation, he didn't have a huge amount of ways to outplay the enemy, but he did force them into his clone, and if you can get a clone like double proc on 2 people, that's going to be some great damage. He gets his first item, Leandries. We can see how much gold he has. Quite a lot more than the enemy support, even a lot more than the enemy AD carry. Once you get to this stage, 1 full item, you should really be able to take over the game from this. This is kind of your goal every game, to be like this. If you can find a way to get through the early game lane, even though it's really weak, and then once you get around level 6, you try and force some kind of fight where the enemies make an overextension. Then you get an advantage off that, and then you can get a tower, and then that's where you get your gold from. That's the kind of game plan that seems to work now. I think the original Shaco support, he was just kind of really strong back then, and people didn't know anything about it. And so I think now people actually have learnt a bit more. I guess the video that we made has 1.2 million views, which is my most ever. And so at least some of the high elo players must have seen it at some point. Ari's fine. He'll be back in a second, I'm sure. Right now, enemies kind of just giving everything. This game, I think, is quite competitive, but not right now. Topside is pretty far behind. Mid lane is basically nothing. It's only Shaco's lane who has a lead. Roaming topside, Galio is here first. Zach's trying his best to at least do something with top lane. This is not really a good Shaco fight. With Shaco and fights, you always want to be making enemies move into a position where you are, so you can prepare your boxes and force enemies to do something stupid by walking into them. This one's looking pretty good because there is a choke point with a Shaco clone in. Enemies probably should know that wasn't him. He does get the assassination though, places the box down, trying to play around it, but just gets shut down. He doesn't quite have the mobility right now. I have seen some Shaco supports playing with Flash. I think probably Flash Ignite. It's the summoner spells that our mid lane Shaco took. It does give you quite a ridiculous amount of extra mobility. The question is it even necessary? This is not a Zhonya's build. This is actually a full damage build. So the mobility and safety that he would get from Zhonya's, he won't be getting. I could see a situation where Flash would be better, but in late, it really does hurt your laning taking Flash, because the exhaust can save your AD carry's life once, and I'd say that's a lot more valuable. But in a situation like that, early game fight where Shaco isn't in a good position first, he's not really mobile enough to take it. And this is the other sort of big issue that I've seen for Shaco support in solo queue, is that if your teammates don't play around you, or don't play fights the way that you want to play fights, your effectiveness decreases. It's not that he can't win games if his teammates are doing other things, or he can't be effective in these fights, it's that his effectiveness is like a 10 out of 10 in this kind of fight right here, where he's setting up boxes first. His effectiveness in a fight where his teammates push forwards into something and do something themselves, like this Kindred is much lower. Shaco can jump over that wall, but he doesn't really want to. He'd much rather the enemies come to him. I think part of it is that if your teammates know how to play with Shaco, you're going to win more games. If your teammates don't really know your playstyle at all, then you will lose more games. And I think Shaco support has dropped off a bit in popularity. I think he could maybe do with a slight buff, but I know he can be a bit of a monster, so I'm not sure if I really want him to be meta or not. He gets it with the Ignite and the Leandri's burn. You can see burn damage dealt to champions already 1,400. It's pretty good. He's definitely a carry. I mean, like, comparing to Rod of Ages, this is not really like a huge damage item. I'd argue that Shaco does more damage than Ari currently, especially because she's in base, not even in the game. We have the new plants coming on the Rift in this one. Haven't actually played with them yet. I don't adore the ridiculous blast cones that take you like half a screen away. I think that often blast cones are sort of anti-fun. They can be good for like huge plays, but another thing they can be good for is getting people out of situations when they shouldn't be able to get out of them. And who knows, 50% of the time, maybe these will be used for good playmaking. But often it seems like if you're trying to make a comeback and there are lots of blast cones in your jungle, the enemies just have a way out if you try and collapse on them. Shaco placing a box down to cut this off. These two can only split up and then they go into another box. You can see how safe they are in this lane actually with these boxes. These are friendly wards, I think. They are fighting this though. Clone going in, body blocking Kai'Sa. If she uses Q, the clone dies. Pretty good. Suicide's under tower, wouldn't be able to get anything done with it. No huge tricks in this game so far. No real team fights yet though, and those are really where the interesting tricks come in. Shaco is happy to not really team fight. I mean, you saw in that dragon play, Shaco put boxes down, denied this area, stopped the enemies from even coming in. He's happy with that. I mean, in an ideal world, the enemies would try and fight it, they'd all run into a box, they'd all run into his clone and they'd die, but that shouldn't really happen in high elo. Basing by his Hextech Alternator, Phoenix Codex. Interestingly, well, we saw a box just here, and I believe the item he's going for is, what's the long range item called? I always forget this name. Horizon Focus. I believe he's going for Horizon Focus, which I think builds out of Hextech. I could be wrong. But Horizon Focus does, I guess, work with Shaco boxes, and so he placed this one down. Halfway across the map he hits the Victor while he's away in base. It's not very hard to get out of range to get the passive of the item that does more damage if you're over a certain amount of units away. Shaco is never really around where his damage is being done, so as long as it works on his boxes, it makes a lot of sense to me. This again isn't a super competitive fight. Ari's back. Victor's not really strong enough though. No boxes put down. He wasted them all over here, unfortunately. It's a pretty good choke point to fight in for Shaco usually. Not a perfect fight though. You can see lots of boxes unused over here. That's a sign of a fight that wasn't very well planned. Just putting more boxes down, trying to deny the area. They can see this one, unfortunately. Clone used, so he doesn't really have much mobility left. He doesn't have Zhonya's, he doesn't have Q, doesn't have Clone. Kindred kind of popping off. Shaco unfortunately not contributing a lot. Does put this box down to try and stop any counterplay. You can see him invading, trying to get control of this. This is a really good box. I love this box. If his team really wanted to do Baron, and anyone tries to walk through this closest path to get to Baron, they just couldn't. I think that around this point is where Shaco becomes a hilarious support, where you can just put boxes down everywhere, such as this one. And even boxes you put down a minute ago, 30 seconds ago, can give you such good value. When I'm playing it, I like to just invade. That's what the old master Korean Shaco player would do. Invade the enemy jungle, put boxes down in choke points, like here for example. This is a great one that I haven't seen before. This is another good one. It covers this spot and this spot. This one covers anyone walking in from here. So you can sort of deny like a whole part of the map if you just put like one here, one here, one here. Ideally one over here, but they'll probably sweep this one. And that's the kind of thing that can set up a Baron for you. He does get his Horizon focus. It also reveals the enemy. I think that Shaco Box maybe does that anyway. Works with slows and immobilization, so pretty good with the fear. Enemies just can't quite get a grip on this game to take a proper fight, unfortunately. But that's kind of Shaco's ideal job anyway. This is not a bait teamfight build. This is a deny enemies from walking anywhere near you kind of build. If he was going for Zhonya's, you'd expect him to be like in people's faces a lot more, baiting a lot more. But no, this build is definitely a lot more meta. I think you can go Demonic Embrace second. I haven't tried it in the new season. It was probably the best option last season. Again, also just makes you a bit more tanky with the health. Lets you actually take some risks. Okay, the box setup here. 2 in mid lane to stop enemies from getting flanks on you. 1 over here to stop another flank. And then an area to walk to if you need safety. And then this area will also deny enemies trying to walk in from to contest the Baron. Puts another one down, another choke point he puts it in. You can see he's constantly just like thinking, what's the choke point I haven't put anything in yet? How do I stop them getting into this fight? Another one to protect if they engage through here. They're actually playing a bit too aggressive. Shaco clone is up though, luckily. He uses that just for a guaranteed escape. Another one put down. Every single time he sees an opportunity to block a choke point, he's putting it down. Pretty good. And now he's basically stronger than the carries on the other team. Maybe not Victor. Probably still Victor. And he's just gonna most likely walk into the enemy's jungle, I think, and just keep placing these things down. This is a zone of safety for everyone. I disagree with him queuing forwards, but he does have the safety of this box, I guess. I think Zach probably could have got a kill there at least. No flash on Shaco, no ult, no Q. Just Ezreal. So he's probably going to try and get a box on this side if he can. Maybe he's just relying on the other ones over here. You don't want to walk into Fog of War if you don't have to. Really good Kindred ult, luckily. And the boxes are fearing. I don't know if Ezreal can get out of this though. No, he's dead. No boxes remaining. That's your signal to leave. Still gets one down in mid lane just for a bit more safety. Shaco himself can't really push waves. I think I made it pretty obvious that Heimerdinger support is like my favorite always, and Shaco can struggle with some things that other supports can do, like pushing waves, but at the same time controlling areas is his specialty, and so if you're doing that, you're doing something right. Box down here, goes for a bait play, someone gets pulled into it, pretty good. These boxes still on this side, not near the wave so they won't proc. Box placements and just remembering where you got to put them is, I guess, pretty much all of Shaco at this point. If you're putting boxes down in the right place, you're basically as good as this guy. I think the decision making, I'd question some of his cues forwards. I know they're winning this game, so he's probably just like, whatever, man. Let's just do it, see what happens. This is definitely just like a see what happens play, sending your clone into tower. He's trying to get the wave in. Huge vision plant. Does it go in every direction and just reveal people? Puts a box down to deny this guy's escape. Sort of only one play you can really make. He's just sitting on the box, by the way, just trying to bait someone to walk over to him. He's sort of a free kill, and so Fiora goes for the free kill and gets immediately feared. He's taken half of this guy's health, just 2 boxes. It's still not a one fight though, and he's making a pretty good comeback in this play. But his Q is up, he gets out. Dude, his ultimate is also only a 50-second cooldown, really low. Box put down over the wall to give Darius an option. It's a little similar to playing something like Janna, where you protect your teammates with things, but Shaco's protection instead is giving your teammates options to do things. For example, putting a box down they can kite towards. I think that's one thing that teammates don't always understand as well, is that if they just walk over here, then enemies cannot beat them in this fight. You can see Darius kiting a little left instead, for example. Not a huge big mistake from him though. Pretty fine fight. Okay, so Shaco Support. Next thing, always you got to think about what's coming next on the fight, on the map. Dragon is up. Who knows if enemies will try to contest or not, but your job is to put boxes down and protect it. Next thing coming up, still quite a while on the Baron, so his choice is to invade the enemy jungle. They still have this mid inhib. They can attempt to make a side lane play while they're waiting for the Baron to come back up. They got the new, is it Chemtech Soul? Who knows? It's not Chemtank. Chemtech. I think the new one is a lot more balanced than the old one is. This one, I believe, just gives health and makes you sort of harder to kill, as far as I remember. There's no revival or anything. It's more of a I think it's the lower health you get. Wait, it says over here, right? While below 50% health, you get damage resist and do increase damage. I think it's a lot more fair, and I also think that it's more balanced. I think anything that sort of you can beat with damage is probably usually the most fair thing in League. Not a great fight here, but you can see he does have one box all the way up there. Maybe it'll be useful. Come on, someone walk into it. Free pick on Galio, someone? No. Man, if you had people who love playing with Shaco on your team, you would be able to make so many endless plays where you just chain boxes together. One thing I do like is putting boxes next to each other. Like, enemies walk into one box and they're like, ah, we just popped that, that's good. And then they keep chasing you, being like, ah, it's probably fine, we'll be safe. And then they walk into another box and then they die. It's great, it's good. So the runes he had in this game, very similar to the old ones. He does have Gathering Storm. He's very much happy to play for late game. Even has magical footwear. It really shows, I guess, where the build has gone. This guy is happy to get through lane with his skill, happy to stack all of these things up and become a monster. The old runes, I'll just show, were more to do with getting through lane. I think I'd recommend Biscuit Delivery. The rest are basically the same. This is Scorch versus Gathering Storm, which is an age-old debate. Scorch is fine. Gathering Storm is fine, doesn't really matter. Don't get too obsessed with it, you know. The builds are a bit different. He does still go Demonic Embrace, still testing it. But there you go, there's the build. I think that this pick has improved recently. I think it will still be good in Season 13. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, which should be Shyvana top lane, who I believe is still the exact same Shyvana, so we'll see how he's doing.